Good evening, everybody. I'm not quite sure what happened the last couple of times we did these, but it was like we start the meeting and then 3 minutes later after the meeting starts, we get this big crush of people. So I don't know if the same thing's going to happen tonight or not, but this meeting's probably only going to run for about an hour tonight because we don't have an awful lot to go over unless you guys have a ton of questions, and then we can do that. Um, So I'm starting to think about people that I can bring on to these meetups that are going to be really impactful and useful to you guys in building out these storage instances and so forth, leading up into the April 23rd event. And I think more and more of it will become focused on the partnering program as we start to do it. I'm going to explain a little bit about calendaring and what's been going on just to keep you guys in the loop and so you understand kind of exactly how it's sort of come together over the last 6 months and into April 23rd. Um, and uh, and hopefully, as we kind of move into that, getting closer to product launch, these events, in some cases, maybe even the whole event can be turned over to a third party who can actually assist in some ways. Might be licensing, might be related to partnering, might be related to distribution. There's just all kinds of different areas we can focus on to help you guys out. Tonight, I'm going to focus primarily on where we are with the Examiner build out, kind of what it's done to the rest of the scheduling, and then we'll dive into questions and talk about that. So, as everybody kind of knows, when we did December, we got this big giant order bundle of Examiners, and it really submarined all of our plans, what we were kind of working on. Everything kind of turned into that direction on one half of the team. The other half of the team was sort of fighting the fires of the servers kind of getting bashed, and I guess third of the team, and then the other third was core engineering, who just have kept their heads down and kept doing their work and moving it forward. And so what happened over the last couple of weeks, I had set up this integrator partner to do the Examiners, and I have a long history of building systems, so it took me a while to kind of decide exactly how we were going to move out of me building them here in the first sort of bespoke versions and then moving into an integration status. I found a partner, pretty good partner in California, and I think they're going to be good with us long term. But I think they're going to be a partner that will work with us against our specs. In other words, we'll shoot them, requirements, and they'll build systems for us, and then those will get sold. And I think that that's different from how we'll get other kinds of partners, which will be here comes that big load in the server. I don't understand this. This is like exactly 4 minutes later. Anyway, the deal is that we'll also engage partners that will build their own. They'll design their own configurations and then pass them past us to review and approve. And then ultimately what we'll end up with there is kind of a licensing schema. And, there will be some others that will take on just a raw distribution capability. And we've been given some names for people that want to do that. We have a couple of providers that have, thrown their hats into that ring. And so there will be some just raw distribution capability. So there's a lot of different ways that we can skin the cat, and we will. And the only thing I ask is just everybody be patient, because it's a long game, and we will get to all of these things just like we do. I mean, we knock them down one by one, and we will knock that down as well. And I know if you've really been following carefully in the server, maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but you probably should. And I'll just go ahead and kind of like I always do, be as transparent as possible. I really see a day in the future where Examiners are 90% of the network. I just do. And I've not been shy about that. And everything that I'm doing is just really watching how Helium has kind of really did their thing, and the level of success that they had and the level of success we're going to need in order to make this thing real. And the one thing I'll say about that is that, we're going to ultimately want to keep DIY in some capacity. But I think we hit a ceiling there at some point. I think right now it's obviously going to continue to be the headliner. I think it'll be the majority for a while. But what'll end up happening is we'll run out of DIYs unless we ultimately accept, really dirt cheap configurations, and if we allow farms to go wild, and if we allow significant amounts of reward coins to be fed off to those guys, such that a bunch of YouTubers show up and make crazy videos again and stuff like that. I mean, we can turn that switch on anytime we want if we wanted that, but at the end of the day, we don't want that. So real good high quality DIYers like most of you, I just think there's a ceiling. I mean, I just think that there's a limit to what we can achieve there ultimately, and I don't think there's a limit at all for people that just aren't techie or don't want to be techie putting an appliance on a shelf. The Examiner not that yet, and it may never be that in the 4-drive configuration. But small little tabletop NUCs with NVMEs inside of them could easily be something that you just pop on. We still have a really slick mobile interface, mobile application to develop so that the setup's a lot easier. We still have to really figure out how to get past this port forwarding thing to really make it clean and convenient. And so we have a number of challenges ahead of us, and we know what they are. And that's why the Examiner is only on 0.8 right now. So, that's kind of an overview of that situation. So I found this integrator in California, and they took a while to get ramped up. First of all, we had to bleed components into them. And as we were getting these components delivered into them, then of course China New Year came along, and that was challenging. And so we had stuff that got hung up in customs. We had other stuff that, had to wait till after China New Year. And, it was just kind of one of these things, and it happens. And so we kind of pushed back off the deadlines from what we originally forecasted. You can't really give us too much grief over that based on the way the world is working right now. You can't really find anything that's working correctly in terms of, computer componentry and stuff that's actually connected to electronics that has chips in it and so forth. So it is what it is, and we're working through it. The good news now is that California's gotten they're in the saddle now, and so we have the process all set up. We have the process for shipping labels, everything, the packing materials are with them, everything's there. And they finally got off the bubble and started shipping units this week. They actually had units ready to go last week, but we were in this process of rolling out a new update to the Examiner to version 8.4 because we were running into a number of little wrinkly things that kept showing up over and over again. There was about 4 or 5 of them that were really kind of getting really annoying, and ultimately we realized we needed to do some more work, and we did, and held them back from shipping so we could get that 8.4 on there, and so they started shipping. And in their very early first go round of it, I think they've averaged somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 23 systems a day in just the first couple of days. And then they ran out of, the loose fill materials that we used to double box the system. So, I had to rush in a bunch of bags of that, trying to figure out exactly how much it's going to take to do. Of course, that would be the time that, the box manufacturer would run out of our box. So we had to go with a larger box, which each up more loose. I mean, you don't even want to know all the things. It's just one after the other, and it's just going to always keep happening because that's what this business is about. Bottom line of it, though, is I'm seeing really encouraging signs that they're going to be able to crank it up. Production manager is now looking at it and saying, okay, I know what it is. Now I need to figure out, bringing on people for night shift and weekend work. And my gut tells me that in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see some pretty powerful build and ship from them. And we'll get a real sense of exactly what they're able and capable of doing. And I think a lot of people are going to start to be pretty happy that have been very patient all along and so forth. And, the last couple of months have been challenging for our team in a lot of ways, But after we got kind of past the real big hump of it, I thought things were really starting to smooth out. The last couple of weeks, we've gotten some really nasty folks that have shown up and really wanted to lay into us, and I was kind of surprised about that, and it's just been an interesting sort of thing. What we did to sort of accommodate that, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but if it does, it does. I don't care. We set up a process that if you're in that list of people waiting to get a unit and you're just tired and you just, maybe you just don't like something. I don't know what it is, and you just want to get rid of your order. You now have the ability to transfer your order to somebody else. There are plenty of people waiting, that we know of. In the channel, there's about 5 or 8 people that have said that they're waiting. But if we run through those people, I've got a huge list, and then we've got the whole wait list. So if you're, the wait lists are 5,000 and 7,000 deep, by the way. So if you're somebody who really feels like you just want out, you can get out now. We're not going to refund you, but we will match you up with somebody else who will refund you. You won't make a profit off the unit on our side, at least. You might be able to do it on eBay or something. I don't know, but here, if you need an escape, you can get it. One person already did it, and he did it precisely because he doesn't like me personally. So, fine. and if that's your reason, fine. Bring it on. It's okay. It's okay. You know what? It's okay. We just need to keep doing what we're doing. You guys need to keep doing what you're doing, and ultimately we'll get through this period. We will get to launch, and then ultimately things will start to really smooth out for us in sort of the long term. But every time we have a situation or ability, we will always make it favorable to you, and we will always do stuff to make it favorable to you. Somebody asked today about, the bonuses that we're giving out for being patient on the wait list. And the guy was like, it ain't enough. Can you just give us an extra 100 coins every week until ultimately you ship? And then what? What happens if we reach 100%? Do we then owe you money for buying the machine? I mean, and the admin asked, why? I mean, a lot of I think we might even be the only project that actually provided bonus payouts in order to keep people happy while they were patiently waiting for these orders. Everybody else, 12 months in, waiting for orders, they don't get anything. And the guy had the stones to then turn around and tell the admin to shut up and stop being snippy with him. So I gotta ask everybody, if you see any of that, and you gotta call bullshit on it, because it just is bullshit, and we're doing our best to try and make this whole thing work during these very difficult times, and I think in the end you guys are all going to benefit from it. So anyway, that's our situation. The California integrators cranking up. I think you're going to see good things. If you really want out, you can get out. The order tracker shows very clearly now how much of a bonus we're paying you, how much we drag forward the rebates. It also shows where you are in the list. I think you're going to see those numbers start to go down pretty rapidly. If they don't, you can't come back and beat me up on it. It means something happened in California. But I'm standing on them pretty good, so I don't think that's going to be the case. And most importantly, this 8.4 update really looks like it's probably going to be the thing, because we haven't really seen a terrible amount of support issues crop up since we did the blanket update. And this gives you an idea how this works. I don't know what it is. It's 100 and actually I do know what it is. Hang on a second. So it's 190 units that are online right now, and out of those 190 units, it looks like, I mean, all but like a handful, all but like 4 or 5 got updated. And that's really the benefit of this process, is that, it all happened without them even knowing, right? Some of them knew, obviously, but they didn't have to do anything. The machines just updated major, and some of them were actually 2 revisions behind, because we weren't really in that process of doing, blanket updates as we have it now. But our core developer's been doing a lot of work on the back end. So this is the thing. When I keep talking about examiners are going to be the thing, it's not about what they shipped with on June of last year. It's about what they're going to end up shipping with in about another 6 months. Because in another 6 months, you're just going to not, be able to not have one of these things. And if you want to provide storage on our network, just because of all the stuff that they really bring to the table, a lot of stability improvements on the platform that we did. The other thing that was really helpful, so I'll just share this with you on the Examiner. So um, and it was kind of manipulative on my part. I do that from time to time. I think everybody knows that about me now. But in the beginning, what we had was we had one of our, one of my co-founders actually was spending a lot of time actually remoting into people's units and just fixing them so that they didn't have to deal with it, right? And what it did is it gave the impression that Examiners never really had any problems because we just remoted in, cleaned them up, and left. But then I kind of realized that because there's wallets that are present and open and unlocked, there's kind of a financial legal liability there, and I didn't really want to see us get into some weird, law situation because we remoted into somebody's unit and we didn't have a very good, release clause built into there or anything. And so I kind of said, look, no more remote access, no more remoting into people's units. We got to just fix the software so that it actually does the right sort of stuff. And one of those things was we need to get good solid log collection so that, because that's all really he was doing. I mean, he would log in, he'd bang into the machine, he'd read the logs, figure out where it went off the rails, and then set it right. And so now what happens in your support screen is you can actually go and you can get those logs. You can read them yourself if you want to start out that. And when we do set up the support portal for everybody in the public, you'll be able to just, add your logs directly, upload them, or just say what the log problem is that you're seeing. And we'll have obviously FAQ items that will start to show up for specific log issues. It's also informing the troubleshooter a little bit already, and will continue to inform the troubleshooter more. So that's really kind of helpful. And again, going to make that whole Examiner, the whole support page has been reworked, completely. So you can now re-download the blockchain from that page. You can restart the supervisor application that's running it. So you can do an awful lot from that page yourself to self-support when things go off the rails. The other thing that we saw a lot, let me just read some notes here real quick. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the other thing that we're not really sure of why this is happening, by the way, but doesn't really matter because it's seemingly not happening as much. But over the last couple of weeks, we had a number of issues hit the streets from the shop, and they just weren't coming online right for some reason, and we still don't know exactly why. They seem to all be slightly different. So, but what it does look like is that 8.4 is probably also going to resolve a lot of that stuff. So it's a real big update for us. And yet it's still not 1.0. So, we talked a lot about what 1.0 looks like. 1.0 is remote access. 1.0 is a number of different things that we want to do. And we've kind of got that going along the way. In that vein, I want to also mention that, there's this thing where we started out with whatever. I don't even remember what the peak was back in the old days, but we leveled off the Discord community, and the Discord community is truly our community. Telegram is whatever it is. There's 2,000 people there now, but I don't really consider it. Facebook's growing. I mean, it's active. Twitter's active. All of our socials are doing well, but Discord's the thing, and there's 10,000 guys here now, or guys and gals here now. And back in the day, we leveled off around 1,400 and just sort of stayed there in that zone. And I like to joke about it, although I don't think it's really a joke. I think there's a lot of truth to it. Some significant percentage of that 1,400 were just haters that were here from the project we forked from, waiting for us to fail. And they just either haven't left yet, or they never log in and look, or whatever. They're not community supporters, in other words. So we had a really tiny community. I mean, we just did, and it was one of the reasons why we couldn't really get exchange listings very easily. And then of course all these videos, then you guys, and now we are where we're at, and now we're starting to level off, and now we're starting to even see some of the stats look like we're losing some people, and that's okay. There'll be a consolidation, just like when you get a big green candle, and that's exactly how it works, and it's fine. But the really neat part about that is this, back in the day when I would ask if there's anybody out in the audience that, was a good React or Angular type dev, or somebody that knew Golang, or somebody that had some specific skill sets to do anything, I said, we're looking for QA people, for instance, we just didn't have a big audience to draw from. So the candidates that would show up, by and large didn't end up working out very well, really weren't really very much of anything. But now what we have is we have these, 7,000-8,000 new folks, and it's a really good cross section, and we're starting to see that there are some people out there that have some pretty decent skill sets, and we're starting to sort of plumb that a little bit. And the one that I think is going to turn out to be pretty interesting for us, we have engaged Adramir, who just sort of out of the blue decided to write this host manager application for you folks so that you can manage multiple units from a single, app. And that app is really strong. I mean, you got to get past the Dockerization of it, but if you can set up a Docker container, then you're good to go. And he's got a ton of stuff that he put into it, like, auto transfers, and, after a certain, number is hit, he's got all the different, coin translations for different currency. I mean, he thought of almost everything. And so it's something, if you manage multiple units, you probably want to download and get familiar with. But we've actually engaged him to come aboard and work on a special app for our relayer, for our customers, because that really is in need of help right now before we get to launch. And so he's going to be working directly with Cam, and I've sort of tasked them with coming together for a common UI UX capability across all of our properties, the console on what equates to AWS console, the relayer interface, the Examiner interface, everything that you essentially access when you touch our thing will have a consistent look and feel across it, so it'll all look like essentially the same application. And so getting some more front end and middleware help in there is really, really critical right now. We're also talking to another guy. I won't actually name him here because I think we haven't really got to that point yet, but it's probably my bad that I didn't know that this existed, because he's actually been here for a little while. But we've been in need of DevOps help, pretty big, and we just haven't been able to find anybody to really come in and help us out with the back end DevOps primarily, and it's caused us to really go a little slower than we would normally, because the core engineers end up having to sort of do their own manual testing in a lot of ways. They end up being sort of QA people. They end up having to sort of orchestrate releases, tagging builds, and doing stuff that oftentimes they wouldn't do. And we just sort of wrote that off. Well, it's startup. That's what happens. Everybody washes the dishes. And in the end of the day, we really did need that. And I think we have somebody who might be good for it that could be coming in over the next week or two to assist us in that area leading into the launch, and then hopefully going forward. So that's another role that we sort of found. We're still looking for potentially somebody to do just regular QA type work there, and we're still looking for somebody to do tech support on the Examiners going forward. So if you know anybody, or somebody's there that's has an interest for that, those are two positions. We always have an ongoing need for senior backend Golang. And at this point, we would entertain full stackers, but to be frank, at this point, I think we're probably okay on middle and front end type people. So that's kind of that part of it. But let me get to my notes here again. Okay, and then the only other thing I really wanted to cover, in this stuff, so I want to finish that thought up as far as the whole Examiner thing, and the thought looks like this. So there's a couple things that just kind of keep cropping up. So like one of the things that we look at with the Examiner shipments is we're going to get these 1,100 units that show up, and we know that out of that number that there's going to be a handful that will end up with CGNAT, which is a sort of an ISP trick to essentially turn all of their customers into one big network, sort of a subnet, scenario. And then what ends up happening because of that is you can't do port forwarding through it. And so a lot of rurals have this, a lot of, places where maybe there's a lot of spread out internet. So for a while, that's going to be a thing. And when people hit that, if they don't have an ability to do anything about it, we need to sort of help them, because otherwise they're going to have to sell their units off, which might not work out badly. I mean, my gut tells me they're going to be able to make money if they sell them. But at the end of the day, they probably want to keep them. And if they do, what we're looking for right now, we've talked to one, and we're going to talk to a couple more co-location facilities about taking these on. Because ultimately, if we wind up with, even as many as, 40 or 50 of these things that need to get sent off to a data center, that could be a thing. If we work out some kind of a, group deal with some data center, then they can all just send them to the same place. Those guys will get really good at managing them. Then when we get the remote access software put in there, then it'll be pretty much just a real transparent process. So that's the kind of thing that we're really focused on right now. And then, the other thing that happens is, as we go forward, we've talked about these new models, and the ones that I'm specifically looking at building, and I'm really interested to hear your feedback on this in the channels as we go forward. But we talked originally about doing high density, but I don't think high density is really a thing in the beginning. I think that's going to be probably 6 to 9, maybe 12 months out. The two that really seem sexy and exciting coming out of the flagship 4U would be a 1U 4U or 1U 4 drive configuration, and then some kind of a tiny NUX, size, maybe a little bigger, but some small form factor PC that is just really, looks like a tiny little, device that sits on a countertop and just, you hardly even know what it is. I think those are the two that we probably have a very valid need for. The 1U4 drive configuration could be removables, or it could be hard in place drives. I'm not really sure what we're going to end up with there. It could be a custom build, or it could be something like a super micro brand if we decide we want to go that direction. But at the end of the day, I think those 1Us really make a lot of sense in a lot of different kinds of configs. You guys actually have a lot of racks set up, so you're already kind of in that place in some cases. People in data centers are going to definitely be in that place. So I think that 1U is really an interesting sort of direction. And then we also know that we're probably going to be offering a 1U to relayer customers. So I think we'll end up with a pretty good build there. Doesn't mean that I think that supply chaining is going to get fixed in the next 2 to 5 weeks. To be honest with you, I don't know if it gets fixed this year. It just, the way it's looking right now, it's going to just take time for that thing to really work through. But I do think there's going to be some ways to get some of those devices in there. So that's kind of the situation. So I'm interested in your feedback on that in the channels. Post your ideas, your thoughts. If you think there's some other platform that we ought to offer instead. One of the things that we talked about, or we're looking at, and like that little NUC device, we might do something where we put one of those together. And then right now, our software for the Examiner, if you plug a USB drive into it, it will actually read it. So, it'll break your rebate for the first year. But once we get past that, devices, our software that we have written for that will automatically pick up that storage. So it's potentially possible that we just sell heads, right? We just sell, these sort of head situations that you buy the computer, and then ultimately you go out and find removable storage and you plug it in yourself, and then ultimately we go that direction. So that might be a product that we put out there on the street. And then finally, I want to finish up this whole part with saying that the way I sort of see it playing out is this: when we do hit that ceiling of DI wires, and if we don't, I'll certainly admit it. And if we don't, and it turns out to be an ongoing long sort of 50-50 proposition or whatever, I've shown that I can bend with the wind. It is what it is. But I don't think so. And if it doesn't, and we do ultimately end up getting into a situation, even as far as like with helium, to where it's a year and a half down the road, or even 9 months down the road, and we just say, look, it just doesn't make sense, we're going to just shut down DIY altogether, or stop releasing new updates to SPD, or whatever the tool is that we ultimately are launched at that point in time for driving a provider. um, you know our history and our track record is we'll grandfather everybody. It's not like we would ever throw anybody off and we can't throw you off the network anyway. I mean, you can keep working on the network forever, but um, we wouldn't throw you off of being included in our provider sets either. We would grandfather you into that process. So we're going to build in continuous time and service incentives, so there will be real strong reasons for you guys to stick around. And once you do stick around, there's going to be loyalty there on our side to you, that we're not going to throw you off or make it, untenable for you to sort of, stay with us. So that's kind of the a thing I want to convey to everybody, so that you can kind of have something to reach back on and hang your hat on. So um, I'm going to go ahead and start opening it up for questions, and with any luck, we'll get done in an hour this week, which is kind of cool. But hang on a second. M4. Have to come to the stage, unmute. Maybe you didn't know you had your hand up. All right, we'll go to the next one. Texan Crypto.
Yeah, thanks for taking my request here. Question on the 1U unit that you're talking about. Is that what kind of ROI can we expect out of a unit like that? That seems like a very sleek configuration. I'll be very interested in that, instead of a bulky unit, because that way I can kind of build a rack, so to say, maybe a half a rack or something like that. It'll be pretty exciting.
Well, it depends on what we end up with, and that's why I mentioned that it could be custom brew, and it could also be something like a super micro, or an HP or something like that. And I think that really informs the ROI, because if we do a custom brew, we could do, pretty much the same configuration we're doing on the 4 drives right now. It'd be a Celeron, or, a really small i3 or something like that, 8 gigs of memory. Just not a config. So, that ends up being about the same price, as the current 4 drive. There's really not much price difference between the two. The chassis that we're paying would be about the same. I mean, it'd be a pretty straight line across. If we went super micro, though, then you're pretty much talking about, I don't even know if they do Celerons. I think everything they do is pretty much, Xeon. But if not, they're still going to be pricier. But same time, you've got super micro behind you, which, if you're anywhere in the world, you have a place to get, repair and service done. And if we go HP, it's the same thing. If, we go a name brand, along those lines, then it really opens up the service potential to be a lot better than what we can provide. We'll get better at providing service, but they obviously are going to beat us at that. So ROI there would be elongated a little bit. Of course, you'd end up paying more for the unit. But remember, we can still do rebates, and I suspect rebates are going to continue throughout this year. So anybody who's worried that they missed the rebates, I don't think you need to worry about that. I think you just really need to worry about China right now. That's the only answer. So, but yeah, so ROIs probably be about the same as the flagship on a custom brew. Probably be a little bit longer on a super micro HP type model.
Great, thanks.
Cool. Ball in a cup.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can.
All right, thanks. Hey, just real quick, I'd like to say I appreciate everything you guys are doing. The rewards is above and beyond anything that I've experienced anywhere else. With that being said, though, and I may have missed if this was answered, with the shipments, I'm still waiting. With the shipments, do you think all of the shipments are going to be out before actual release date of the storage?
Well, I mean, I always, I have to always put some sort of an asterisk on any kind of an answer to that question. But I will say this, um, we have most of the components right now. There's still some components left to source on the tail end. A couple of the components we know we can get them. We just have to send a lot of money to Seagate. So that's the next thing. I mean, they've got the stuff on the shipping dock for us, and I'm just working on getting money over. One of the challenges we had is we just didn't have accounting set up for easy transfer of $500,000 over from our crypto stuff into our bank account, because we didn't go with a like Coinbase as a processor who took a lot of money off the top. So, we've been working through that, and as we go ahead and get those final components in there, I'll have a much better answer to the question. But just looking at this week's production, just looking at what they were able to put out on their very first, iteration of shipping, I'm really optimistic about what this thing's going to look like in about 2 weeks, and I'm sure in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be able to put a much more definitive answer on this question. But 2 weeks puts us at the beginning of March, and then March has 31 days, and then April has 23 days before the actual, launch event in Vegas. So we're talking 8 weeks, maybe 9 if you really kind of stretch it. If I had to bet on it, I'm betting we're going to be done well before then. But then again, if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. And the deal is that shit's gonna happen. It just does. And who knows? But I think we're gonna do well. And that we just work our butts off to make sure it does. So
Absolutely.
I
I
don't.
appreciate you guys.
Yep. Any other questions?
No, that's it for me. I appreciate you guys. That's it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. M4, you made it.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So I was wondering, I'm pretty eager to get excited with mining and whatnot. So I was wondering if there was a specific place where I could find like some specs for a rig.
You mean building one yourself?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
well, we don't really have anything put up in terms of, real minimum recommended, but maybe we do actually in our guides. But you always want to start off at our FAQ in the Discord here, because out of the FAQ, you can then get turned on to all of the guides that we've written. And some of the guides do talk about configuration. The configurations are really easy on these boxes in terms of, as long as you buy high quality components. It doesn't take a lot of processor. It doesn't take a lot of memory. And you should buy quality drives if you can. And that's really the main thing to put one of these things together. We did limit our support, not limit the ability to run them, but we limited what we're going to do as far as supporting the real low end configs like RPIs and other ARM builds. But at the end of the day, you can build a pretty cost effective provider right now. Celeron really is all it takes, but if you go above that, you're fine. 8 to 16 gigs of memory is good number, and beyond that, there's really just not much else to it.
Okay, awesome. And then my other question was for the new rigs that you guys are building. Do you guys know around when we would be able to get on that list?
Well, that list is really long right now, and what I think will end up happening though with that list is that list will peel down significantly once we actually turn it on. My guess is it'll probably go off at a 1 for 4 or a 1 for 5 when we actually open it up. That said, each model has plus 5,000 people in the wait list. So, and there's a lot of duplicates there too, though. So that's part of why it turns into a 1 for 4 or 1 for 5. But, at the end of the day, I think there's probably several thousand, I'll just say it like that, people that would immediately sort of purchase a unit if we put new units up on the, for sale on the site. I think what I'm about to do here, once I see what California is able to do on the current batch, is I'm going to ask the community what they want to do. I mean, look, I've made it clear that we wouldn't just, out of thin air set up a situation where we ended up with, extended pre-order time periods where people paid money and then had to sit for 6, 9, 12 months. I still not going to do that. But having said that, once we actually get this batch pretty well, off the shelf, once we're 60, 70% complete on it, I'm going to take your feedback. And if you guys are willing to wait about the same amount of time that these folks waited, which is really hasn't been that long. I mean, if you get right down to it, we're like 60 days out from the very first order. A lot of the orders were right around Christmas, so 45 days out. It's not that big of a deal. If you're willing to wait, 2 to 3 months, I can pretty much believe, based on the suppliers I've been talking to, that I can continue to source the way we're doing it and get components in a kind of a haphazard, piecemeal kind of way. And if you're all willing, we'll take another batch. We'll do another batch. But it's going to be a partnership. It's going to be you guys saying you're going to do it, and it's going to be more bold print on the website, because it's really sad to turn around and have people tell you that they didn't know that it was going to take this long, and people sending you emails saying, hey man, it's been 5 weeks. Where the fuck is my system? And it's like, well, I mean, did you read the fine print? Oh, wait, it wasn't fine. It was bold. So, maybe that's why you missed it. Anyway,
okay.
We'll ask you that. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, I myself, I had to wait about. I was told 20 weeks, but I had to wait like about 30 weeks on a helium miner. So I think I would have gone through that. So I would probably wait it out. And I'm pretty bullish on the protocol, just because I'm a gamer, so I know that we constantly struggle with, we don't have enough data, especially with like huge games like Call of Duty. We're constantly having to like delete games so we can download the new update. So I'm very bullish on this, and I mean to build a few rigs and buy a few if I get the chance. Do you think that once we continue to be able to purchase, will we be on like some sort of queue, or we're just gonna get like notified, hey, there's some, and then kind of go in and see who gets them, or how would that work?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I will be the first to admit that the process of the waitlisting getting turned into ordering wasn't very effective on the first go round, and a lot of people, had. Every day we get multiple emails from people saying, "Oh, hey, I just found this in my spam. Can I still order?" And it's like, no. But we'll have to figure that out. I mean, we're gonna have to build a process that's smoother than the way we currently have it with a wait list. So I don't know the answer to that, but I do know we'll work on it, and it'll be smoother than it was this last time around.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. DJ? Well, that was weird. Well, then, Blue Jay.
Hey, sorry, I was talking on mute.
Hey, how are you? Yep, doing good.
Okay, so I had a question. Are you shipping these units internationally anytime soon? I'm not sure, because like when I ordered them in the US, but I might be moving by the time these units start shipping. So I wanted to know if you're shipping them internationally.
Well, there's two answers to your question. One you didn't ask, and one you did. We've been shipping internationally all along, and we will continue to. And we've actually made that process smoother, and I'll explain that in a second. But the other
Okay.
thing is if you hit us with your email that you ordered from, and you can respond on that email, so we can prove it's you, we'll change your address for you. We can move
Okay.
the address. The only problem there, of course, is if you were shipping to New Jersey and now you're shipping to, somewhere in Southeast Asia or wherever, there's going to be a higher shipping cost, so you're going to end up having to pay a little bit more to cover the shipping. But otherwise, if it's just somewhere else to another address in the United States, or it's the same number, then we have no problem changing that shipping address. The one thing that we have changed, and the people that got early ones probably aren't going to like to hear this, but it is what it is. We've been messing around with how the commercial invoices work with importation and different taxing regimes, and I think we've kind of found the secret recipe. We didn't really have it for the first several. We can't mark them down to $100. We just can't. We can't mark them down to where it's a clear tax evasion situation. But we did try to pare them down to the rebated amount, and that's significant. And at the end of the day, what was happening is we were using a discount on the commercial invoice, but about half the taxing regimes weren't recognizing it, so they were still paying the big taxes. What we've done now is we've actually added it in as a line item against the actual product that's on the invoice, and we've cleared it past our shipper, our commercial shipper. So now everybody that gets one of these units in a taxing regime that has 20%, VAT or GST or whatever it's called, they are getting the lower value, so they aren't having to pay as much in the way of taxes. So
That's great.
help everybody out a little bit.
Yeah, that's really good. The other thing I wanted to know was, I'm pretty sure someone would have already asked you, but I haven't been through the channels lately. But I saw Seagate and other like NAS, what do you call them? Like local clouds, right? Like the same kind of device that you have, but yours is configured to your systems. But other manufacturers creating have their own systems where you can put in NAS drives and use that as as your own cloud, right? And they obviously have better drives, they have better CPU system compared to other DIY solutions that people would be making compared to using an external hard drive. Any chance that those could be configured to be used on the examiner as an examiner?
So first of all, I'll dispute that last thing you said, in that they're better configurations, because it's an ARM build inside of a Synology, and Synology is a very good brand of NAS. But at the end of the day, it's an inexpensive processor configuration, but it works and it's good, and they certainly support them, and they're really very usable devices. And it was the challenge when we decided to limit Pi, because at the end of the day, the way we can do that is by limiting ARM builds, and those are ARMs, so we have to kind of be aware that we don't limit those. But anyway, to get to your actual question there, I think the way we've kind of looked at that is sort of, it's got pluses and minuses. The deal is that we can write an app to run natively on a Synology or QNAP or any of these, various NAS devices that are out there. And they're good, and people have them and they want to buy them, and it's fine. And I think we do want to do that. Right now you can do them with a Docker container, and it's not all that hard. And people in the channels can help you. I think we even have some materials and guides. But ultimately, the grail there would be for us to write an app that gets bundled with it. So when you actually pull a Synology out of the box, it actually has our app on the desktop, and you just run it. That's the plus side. And I think we will license our stuff to do that. But when we put our app on there, then we have to find other ways to sort of monetize it. So there's just some other things about that. But the bigger issue that's in play there is that the easier we make something like that, the
Yeah.
easier it is for you to go away. And so what happens is you buy one of this Synology and then you get it and you stand it up on our network, and maybe we're doing really well in your neck of the woods, and then all of a sudden you hit a rough patch, and there's just no customer data or very little customer data coming to you for a couple of months, and you're feeling like, well, maybe the project's at a dead end or whatever, and blah blah blah, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't pay attention in the channels, and then somebody tells you about some Chia 2 project that's starting up. It's really easy for you just to switch over and move on to something else. Now, we do have that ability with continuous time and service incentives, and we're going to make that thing really important, to hold you, to lock you in as best we can. But and look, I've not been shy about this. One of the reasons why we are so strident with everybody right now,
Yeah.
is that we want to weed out the people who seem to be the kinds that would leave at almost, the drop of a hat, but any kind of adversarial situation that the project throws their way. We just don't want them to start, because we know they're going to
Okay.
leave. So the same
Yeah.
thing happens with like a Synology. If it's really easy to start it up, it's also really easy to shut it down, and it's really easy to move over to somebody else. Maybe at some point down the road we're okay with that, and we will want people firing up and shutting down very quickly. I just can say right now it's not top of the priority. It's more mid stack of the priority to really instantiate native apps on NAS devices. I think by the time we get to summer, it will
Yeah.
probably be top of the priority, and that's when we'd probably really attack it.
So that's the same problem that you would face with DIY setups.
To a degree, if somebody actually goes to the trouble of screwdrivering together a rig and hand-loving building something, they have a little bit more investment, even emotionally, in their thing, and it's quite likely that they would be here a little bit longer than somebody who's running a NAS for their other stuff, and then turns around and adds this just to take, because the other thing could happen with so you buy a NAS drive and you've got 32 terabytes, and it turns out that you're using 16 for you and you give us 16, but then all of a sudden you find some other, hobby that takes up a whole bunch of terabytes. You got to down 8 on our deal and, take it up for yourself. And that's another reason why you're going to, but it could go the other way. You might actually say, geez, I'm earning all this money, so I'm going to take my stuff down and I'll buy a cheapy removable and I'll build the Synology. So
Exactly.
we're definitely interested in it. It just isn't the top of the priority right now, but it is one of those things that will rise into the top of the priority list as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I see it two ways. One, like that gives me the flexibility that I have the storage and I can use it for my personal use as well. Have my personal cloud. So that gives me one flexibility, and I would say a bigger incentive to joining this program. Because I mean, honestly, I do agree with the fact that we don't want people who are just like running from one project to the other wherever there is high ROI in the short term. However, getting more people onboarded, I don't know if that's a priority, but getting more people onboarded is with the trust that like you be flexible and we will just like let you do what you want. But I mean, that's how you are building the network, and I understand you probably have a better longer term vision in this than my opinion. The one more question I had was, um, so right now the incentives are going down every month, right? So right, and there are a lot of shipments that are still ongoing. So I didn't set up my own rig for that one reason, that I wanted your examiner instead of setting up my own DIY system. But the DIY systems right now are the ones who are getting a higher ROI. So doesn't that what do you say, like incentivize people for doing DIY solutions?
Well, this next part, I think everybody's going to have to pay a lot of attention to, because this is something that we're discussing internally right now, and this is not going to go away anytime soon, but it is going to go away. When you say DIY is making more right now, well, to be honest, you're probably accurate with that. And in fact, there's actually some DIY that I've, really, now that I'm not down in the lab building, units all the time when I'm not, doing other stuff, and I've had a chance to actually do some, evaluation. Um, there are some subset of DIYers who've done quite well actually over the last couple of months, like extremely well. And we allowed that. We built a condition that allowed that as part of our testing regime. I just didn't know they were going to take it as far as they took it. And so we're now going down through the list and realizing that some people have kind of, I don't want to say they gamed it, they're just looking out for themselves. So I get it. But at the end of the day, some people have sort of taken a little bit more advantage than maybe they should have. And they're going to end up paying for it because we're going to go the other way. We're going to swing the pendulum the other way in terms of testing data into product release. What I've really been trying to do, and again, some of you don't like transparency, by the way, and I see that because we hear that everybody likes transparency, but then what happens is we get the rough language in the channels when people really confront the transparency, because the transparency often tells you things you don't want to hear. But
Yeah, I mean, there'll always be enemies on either side, right? Whatever you say, someone will get
yeah,
upset.
there's always going to be somebody who's unhappy. So
Yeah.
so one of the things that happens here is that we've said that we're going to favor examiners, and so we just haven't had a real over the course of the last 18 months. There has come a time in every single month where I have talked to our team and I said, look, let's put some data on the network, and it didn't have anything to do with testing. Didn't have anything to do with testing. It was just, let's give money to people. And why? Because they were helping us build the network that we would keep in place for the testing when we needed it. So, we did that over the course of the last 2 years on a regular and frequent basis. And in some cases, some of those people have made a significant amount of money, not because they made a lot of money back in the day, but because they made a lot of coins back in the day. And then, of course, the coin finally started to achieve a little bit of price discovery, and so they ended up, being able to really do well. And that's no different now. But right now what's happening is I don't have a lot of really important community testing to do. The testing I'm doing right now, I mean, I'm going to show it to you here in an upcoming meeting, but the testing we're doing now is really cool, but it's all about performance on the relayer and how we're actually getting data up onto the network as fast as possible. It's crazy fast. And so that's going to be really cool, but that doesn't really do anything in terms of seeding data out to you guys. And I have this dual mission to make sure that the examiners always maintain some sort of superiority. So, um, did Faust just say that he's limiting the amount of data going to DIYers because the examiners aren't out in the field yet? Yeah, he did. He just said that. And the thing is, it's our money. We can do kind of whatever we want with it. And if we don't want to just like reward you for nothing this month, we aren't going to. What everybody should be taking home right now is that this is the time to just stand up your machine, make sure that it's completely functional, fix any ongoing weird things that happen with your ISP, accept whatever comes your way, and wait patiently until we get to April. And then ultimately, then we can start talking about fairness and seeing what's happening across the network and how we get as much data on to everybody. We are going to slash some data in some of these instances that have way too much. We will turn around and then feed that back out to the rest of the community. It just drives me mad right now that, I see people showing up and saying, yay me, I just picked up 1.2 gigabytes, I'm really happy. And meanwhile, I got some, goofball over here who's sitting on 3.5 terabytes and just smiling because he ate the cat. And, that's not tenable. So the guy with the 3.2 terabytes, hang on a second, okay? I got to stop for a minute. I'll be right back. Apologize for that. That's not tenable. We'll chop that data up and we'll give it out to everybody the way it needs to be given out for this time period. There's a finite amount of money that we have budgeted right now to feed the community, and we're going to use it to feed the community as fair as we possibly can. It's all on me that it got really unfair for a period of time. I apologize for that, and I'm going to make it right. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Cool. EJ. All right, SLK. Coming to the stage. DJ.
Sorry?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Sorry, had some difficulties. Yeah, so I'm a deal myself. One of the attractions that drew me to the project was the cheap entry point. A lot of other projects have got a high barrier. You know, you got to splash out over $1,000 just to get into it. So I'm technical, and I found setting up the DIY stuff fairly simple. But I can see a clear distinction that there's a direction for examiners and a direction for your DIYs. That's potentially because, you know, you've got better software on your examiner, you've got all your auditing, you've built it yourself, so it's got everything you guys want in it. Is there any room for movement on the DIY side to bring the gap, to sort of eliminate that gap between DIY and examiner? So maybe just releasing a distro so that you're basically virtualizing what you have on the examiner as far as software, so you get all your auditing, all the features that you're providing on that hardware, also available to the DIY group. And that might be another path. So it might not replace your current SPD process and client that you use now for the DIY people. People could probably keep using that, but maybe have another path where it's virtualized. So all that auditing, all the stuff that you guys really like about the examiner gets bridged to the DIY group. So then that way it's sort of covering off some of the concerns that you might have on the DIY space, where they just, you know, you sort of go, oh, it's running on Windows, it's running on Linux, it's running on Docker, it could be running on anything. So it doesn't have the auditing. So if you start introducing XYZ data, then the DIY side of it's not going to cut it for certain types of data. So given your hardware constraints with supply and demand and, you know, all that sort of stuff and the wait lists, is there any sort of, have you sort of considered, or is there any plans? From what you previously said, from the last chap that you're talking to, this it's not a high priority for you guys at the moment, I'm guessing. But yeah, can you maybe talk a little bit more if there is sort of a way you can bridge that gap so that it's more a level playing field? I know that there's, like, if you buy an examiner, you're investing money in it, so you're less likely to pull away from it because you've invested X amount into that examiner, so you're not going to walk away. Not as easily as someone maybe setting up a DIY where they haven't had to put so much into the unit to get it running and going.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can answer that in a lot of different ways, but the easiest way is really kind of with a hypothetical, and you know, there's a couple of parts to that you didn't actually touch on, and you know, I'll touch on them right now. So the first thing you said was, you know, the thing that attracted you to the project is you could use dirt cheap hardware, and you know, imagine I'm a salesperson and I'm actually sitting in an expensive boardroom with a fairly high end SME customer who has a lot of petabytes of data they want to dump on the network. And, you know, as a salesperson, I'm thinking to myself that I've got a whole bunch of people I've incentivized to put dirt cheap hardware in place out in the world. Now, my protocol addresses that, but at the end of the day, it's not a very solid foundation to really walk on. And you can make the case that the equipment, the hardware inside of an Examiner is nothing really special, that the hard drives are, but the equipment inside the unit is just pretty standard motherboarding and processor. And so, yeah, I mean, look, it's not head and shoulders above what a DIYer might build. But let's jump right to the hypothetical, because that's really the one that informs this question. So let's say a bunch of you people are able to get out there, and we just go ahead and, through the generosity of our hearts, roll out a distro, like you called it, and allow you to just build it, flat, to end up making an Examiner on your own. Who pays for my software development there?
Yeah, no, I understand you've got costs from a software development, but it's more just a question. So if it's around developing software,
Well, here's the thing: if I gave you the software for $200, would you buy it? That's the question, and I don't think the answer is yes. I think it would have to come down. I think the numbers would get pretty low before people would dive in masse to actually pay for the software, to run on these devices that matches the kind of money that we're able to pull off of the Examiner strategy that we've built. So at the end of the day, I've not been shy about this. I've said it very clearly. Part of the reason why the Examiners are going to be more favored is because of what they allow us to build in a way of the homogeneity we can bring to the network. The ability to build a network that is very, very consistent across an entire swath of devices. That's big. I mean, it's big for just a lot of reasons. But at the end of the day, the other reason that's also very big is I can monetize that process of putting those devices out on the network. And I can't monetize the DIY community. I just can't monetize you. And if you don't like that if you're saying, well, that's the point, we don't want to be monetized, we just want to take money, we don't want to give any money, then I have to say back to you, well, but that's fine, except the problem is that there's a lot of software development that has to go on. And in this software development process, we've got a very clear need, to sell these rigs in order to fund our development.
I mean, I would be more likely to buy the software off you than the miner. If you said, oh, I'm going to sell you the software for 200, your option is buying the Examiner for 600.
Well, what if I did this? Yeah. What if I told you could have the software distro, but you make 20% less in terms of, incentives payouts as the Examiner population?
If I'm still making more than a DIYer without that software, I would say, yeah, no worries, because I'm making more than a DIYer on a standard SPD process.
Well, I think what would end up happening... Well, I think what would happen is that would happen at the same time we just essentially shut DIY off, right? We would shut DIY off and we would say, look, you have to take the software in order to keep the platform consistent across the entire network. But as a DIYer, part of the way you're going to help pay for the software development is you're going to sacrifice a little bit in the way of incentives. And by doing that, ultimately, you get to keep your already instantiated hardware that you bought for other stuff and get to stay, building that way. But at the end of the day, the Examiners still end up with a superior position. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to skin this cat. I don't know how it's going to go. I do know that at the end of the day, somebody's going to be unhappy. It's just what it is.
That's all right. No, I just wanted to. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that.
Sure. That's okay.
Hi, am I on here?
You're live.
Okay, first time I've ever been live on Discord. I just chimed in. I've listened to a few of these now for the last few weeks now, and you just said something that made me want to comment. And I do have a question, but I since the 24th, with a rig that I've got about $680 invested in, and the bulk of that money is just the brand new, really nice hard drive. I have 95.4 gigabytes, and I am thrilled to death with that 95.4 gigabytes. just spending the whole week getting that thing together and learning Linux and trial and error. And then when it finally got announced and came online, I don't plan on ever turning it off. My problem now is I wish I had put more drives in it. So I have one 14 terabyte drive. I've got plenty of space for more, but I'm so scared of breaking this machine or causing it to just stop working. I think I'm just going to let it sit there. So hopefully I can get an Examiner in the future. And I don't know, when you said something about the people that were thrilled about just getting a few gigabytes of data, like I said, since the 24th, mine's climbed up to 95 and I'm thrilled.
Well, I
So-
think there's one thing to be aware of there that's actually going to work in your favor. So we've identified a problem, and it actually affects everybody, Examiners and DIYers. It affects everybody in that there is a process of how data is distributed on individual separate drives, folders, really, on every configuration that's out there. And we haven't really plumbed it down to understand why the original renter host protocol was designed this way back in 2016 or whenever it was. But the problem with it is that it actually turns every configuration with more than one folder into a RAID, and not a RAID with redundancy, but a stripe, which means that you're actually risking entire contracts across multiple folders just by having multiple folders. And of course, because of this drive zeroing that goes on Windows boxes, we have tended to recommend multiple folders, even if you only have one drive, forever. And so everybody has multiple folders. So we recognize we've got an issue there, and it's a major issue internally that we are focused on our development. The only reason I bring it out, I'm happy to talk about this in the channels if somebody wants to go deeper into this. But I will say mainly that this is an issue that we are investigating the different ways out of it, that we're going to change the way contracts distribute data across folders on individual instances, providers, essentially. And in your case right now, if you were to add another drive, you probably wouldn't hit the problem because you said you learned Linux, so you're running Linux, which is the first good part. But there are situations, even with Linux boxes, where sometimes the systems go into long thinking processes when new drives and new folders get instanced on there. And so I can understand your reticence to add. But I think once we get past this sprint that I'm describing, and we're going to try and do it before April, or at least we'll be a ways along on it by April, the deal is you should feel more comfortable about adding another drive or changing drive configuration in that rig. So I wouldn't be too nervy about that going forward, because I think you're going to be able to upgrade that rig. What was your second question, or the second part of the question?
Well, I guess the second question was, I'm just wondering if right now it might be smarter, instead of putting more money into this machine and adding drives to it, if I should just save that money, let this machine just run as long as it'll run on the network, and take that money and hopefully get an Examiner. I'm on the waiting list, but I have no idea where on the list. And then in the future, if I get that Examiner, is there any reason why it would hurt to have the Examiner in my DIY, running from the same house on the same ISP?
The reason there are so many people on the waiting list for the Examiner is there are a lot of really smart people here right now who watched and participated in some of these other projects. And of course, the king of those is Helium. And what they know is that we're on the front end of a 2-year slope. So far, at least. We don't know how far Helium's going to end up going, but we know what they looked like back in the day when they looked like us. And so anybody who buys an Examiner in the next 12 months is going to do fine. They're going to do really well. And in fact, if you really want my opinion, although this gets a little bit, shilly, at the end of the day, I think they're going to do crazy well. Actually, I think they're going to end up looking back in hindsight and be those people that said, "Yeah, I bought in early," and blah blah blah. So no matter where you are on that wait list, that's a good strategy, I think. And I think everybody who fights against the Examiner is fighting a losing battle, because in the end, if you decide not to go there, I understand it. But if you decide not to go there, you're probably going to look back a year from now and kick yourself and say, I don't know why I did decide that. I should have. Just because that's how we've seen it play out. Look, at this stage, we know one major thing, and this is where it gets a little speculative, and so anything I say next is just my opinion, has no bearing on what's actually going to happen, but it is just, sort of an opinion of somebody who's got a bit of background in it. So, we went for a long time as the real quote unquote mining emission played out. Our coin is a Blake 2B algo for proof of work. So when you talk about mining for real on our blockchain, that's actually done with an ASIC device, and we have a fairly good hash rate now on that. Well, that process, like for instance on Bitcoin, we all know goes through this halving process every 4 years, and then the amount of emission is, cut in half. Well, that's really not a very effective and smooth way to do it. Creates a lot of volatility in the coin price. Our emission declines by a very tiny amount every single block. And as more and more miners come on, difficulty increases and ultimately pushes people back off, or slows them down from adding more resources onto the mining. And we've been doing that dance now for about 2.5, 3 years. Well, over 3 years actually. And so now we're actually coming to the tail end of that emission where it really starts to flatten out. So there just aren't a lot of coins coming onto the market. When you earn coins as a storage miner, you're earning coins that have already been mined. When you're mining coins with an ASIC, you're creating new coins out of the emission, and there just aren't that many of those left. And so now that we're in that place where people are starting to realize there just aren't that many of those left, they go out on the exchange and they look to purchase and they realize, well, if I wanted to buy any quantity, if I wanted to get in early here, I'm going to have to pay some pretty good money. And so there's this push and pull going on right now. But that's only because we are where we are, which is just coming out of this place where nobody knew about us to this place where you guys know about us. And so we used to call ourselves the early adopters, the people that were here for the first 2 years. But you guys are really the early adopters. If you look at any technology S-curve adoption, you're that wave that's really still early before the real big wave shows up. The big wave will be when we get on bigger exchanges, and it will be when we get out there and we're willing to take our foot off the brake and put it full on the gas. Right now, the foot is firmly on the brake. If you don't know that about what's going on here, we are not trying to grow the network right now. We want to preserve value for all of you people. We don't want this thing to have 50,000 hosts overnight. We just don't. We'll get there when we need to get there. We don't need to get there today. So what I'm saying is, in my long-winded way that I always do, is that we are going to get real price discovery on the coin over the course of the next 12 to 14, 16, 18 months. And when real price discovery comes, we will see exactly how far this thing can go. And I think really we stand a chance to do some pretty amazing stuff there because we've completely and totally decided to just not do the typical crypto dance. And yes, it means we've missed out on some things, along the way. But I think what it's going to ultimately do, we're going out there and going to try and sell real storage to real people for real money. And we're going to live or die on that, right? We're either going to win or we're not. And if we win, and of course I believe we're going to win, right? I really, truly believe in this thing. So when we win, right, when we actually do show the world that there is a real use case for blockchain, other than selling JPEGs to somebody, then at the end of that day, the people in the crypto community and the people that are in institutions that are starting to bank and bet on crypto, the people that are really starting to buy into this thing are going to learn about us because we will be one of the very few use cases that has real adoption in the real world and shows the real crossover. Right now, if you look at one of the coins that has a significant market cap. You know, we'll go back a few months to when, you know, things were doing really well for altcoins. Well, we'll take two. We'll take Filecoin and we'll take Arweave. You know, Arweave is interesting. They've got this yellow paper that they wrote. I still think it's BS, but it is what it is. They got Silicon Valley money behind them, so they have that institutional buying pressure. So they got on a decent exchange very early. And, you know, the coin went up and got worth about $2 to $3 billion, I think, at the peak, maybe a little higher. Filecoin, in a fully diluted way, at one point was worth $40 to $50 billion. So those are big numbers in crypto, right? And $40 to $50 billion, if we were anywhere between the 2 and 3 of Arweave and the 40 to 50 fully diluted of Filecoin, you know, just give us a $20 billion market cap. Our coin is at a $40 or $30 million market cap today. So you said you have like 95 gigabytes or some whatever number you got on there right now. You know, if over the next several months you're able to bank, you know, a few thousand coins through a combination of earning them on storage providing, maybe picking up and buying some as you go for collateral and continuing to build that collateral bank that you have on your rig, such that we get to that point next year that we rival those crypto projects, you know, you're talking about, you know, huge multiples from where you are today. That's why an Examiner is going to be just an amazing purchase going forward, because of those rebates, the way that we are standing up the coin distributions on them, the way they just are going to get favored. Everything is going to make that a really, really, really big equation. And that's not even the end. That's not even the end game. That's just looking at the world as it exists today, right? That's just saying, well, if we rise and sort of, you know, get in line with our peers, we should do okay. But here's the thing. You look at, you know, the big companies that are providing cloud storage for, you know, in real earnest, like if you were to take a Wasabi market cap and compare it, it just dwarfs this whole crypto world, right? So at the end of the day, those numbers at the top of the crypto list are really not a ceiling at all. They seem like a ceiling, but they just really are not a ceiling at all. If we show that we are banking real storage for real businesses, we will blow through those numbers like nobody's business. We'll become a real thing that, you know, people in equities start to pay attention to. And of course, you know, there is a stock component here with the development shop. There's also these SPFs that are involved. So there's just a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, that's how you're going to make all your money. I've said it without any, reticence to say it in public. It's not something that I'm using to sell you on joining the project. I'm just telling you, I think personally that's what I think's going to happen. It's also possible that the whole thing could implode and go to zero by September. So, you know, I'm just telling you my opinion.
Thank you.
Sure. I hit. Well, you're not muted. Still can't hear you, though. I'm going to call somebody else while you're working through your tech issues. Wrath.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Hey, first things first, love the project. This is it's really cool, man. I'm super happy to be a part of it. I wanted to kind of echo what I think I heard I want to say DJ said earlier about you offering the software to DIYers. I second that motion where he was saying that I would definitely pay for it. And I think it's one of those things too, like we already fork over the 600 SCP to even get started in the first place. Like I know it's like we just have to have that in our account. But at the same time, you could even tax it on top of that, right? Like, hey, to get started, you have to fork over like 200 extra SCP or whatever it is. I don't care what the price is, but whatever that would be, right? And then like that's like your getting started cost. Like as long as you have that in there, like it immediately deducts it from there. Like just let it be known, like, hey, when you start this XA software, if you want to call it that, for your DIY miner, it's gonna charge you whatever amount of SCP. Make sure you have X amount in there plus your 600 for your collateral. Blah 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 blah. And like if you just made that aware, I think it would work out really well. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, I like to
I
see
think the taxing part probably works. The part that I want to make clear, when you buy coins on the exchange, that doesn't do anything for us, right? I mean, we don't get paid when you buy coins on the exchange. That's a purchase you're making that's going to benefit you.
Right.
And when you buy your hardware, obviously from Amazon, that doesn't benefit us either. So there has to be that taxing component in there that you mentioned.
Yep, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. The taxing component is the key right there. It's like, yeah, you pay for this software, and I totally agree with what you're saying because the development should not be free. It's a lot of stuff that goes in there. So, but I think at the same time though, it would help you with two things, right? One, it would kind of help out with liability because like I can already see this being like one of those things where it's like, oh, I got an XA miner like for something didn't work, so now I'm going to blame Faust's team for sending me this miner now, and I didn't have a choice, but I got it, and now it didn't work, and I should get incentives, right? Like it kind of helps you avoid a couple of things with that, like, and also like if there's people that are a little bit more superior with their setups. Like I have a power vault, right? I have equipment that I'm an old data center guy, so I have a power vault here. Actually, two power vaults here. So I have a lot of terabytes of disk, and they're in RAIDs, and they're hot swappable and all that good stuff. So I'm like ready for high availability. And so I would like to be able to obviously participate continuously with that. Because I know you said you were planning on shutting down DIY. I don't know if that truly means you're like going to stop all DIY from participating, or if that means just incentivize, right? Why there won't be as lucrative, I guess, as a XA would be. But yeah.
I think one thing to understand there is that, and I think a lot of people come away sort of confused about this, that they maybe sort of think that we have a vision, and then behind the vision we have a plan, and that the plan is very well fleshed out, and that now it's just a matter of executing from here into eternity. And we do have a pretty solid vision. I'm not going to say we don't. And we do actually have a reasonable roadmap that we're working on. But look, when we get out there and we start selling storage to people, we're going to find out a lot of things that we have made in terms of assumptions turn out to not be true. And when we start finding those things out, we're going to have to do some pretty, solid and quick pivoting, and, we'll have a chance to make some mistakes along the way, and we will. But one of the things that could easily happen, I could see, is that, we might end up in a situation. Remember, this is a permissionless network. So you can stand up a rig right now on this network and you can charge whatever the heck you want. You don't have to ask us what the pricing guidelines are. You can just charge whatever you want. Now, we're not going to buy storage on your unit if you go outside our guidelines. That's not true today, by the way. Technically, there's actually some units that have been outside the guidelines that have gotten some storage from us. But that's just because we're in the process of, finalizing that strategy to limit contracts. But the deal is that you can do that. And right now, there's no real clean way for people to rent that storage, right? You can download the renter that exists on our website. It works, but it doesn't work great. And that's what kind of killed Saya, in the long term, because they just really didn't ever really get that working well. But at the end of the day, somebody else is going to come along and see this really sexy, exciting permissionless network, and they're going to say, well, look, we can store stuff on this network, and they'll figure out a way to write, their own, interface to it and go forward. We put a lot of time and energy and money into the relayers, so it's not easy to build a distributed renter like ours. But that doesn't mean you couldn't come along and build a single use case renter. And so there might end up being people that are buying storage on the network that you find, well, hey, I don't necessarily have to be beholden to SCP Corp for all my stuff. I can go ahead and run the stuff on the side. Now, we have said that it's quite likely if you do accept data from community renters that we're not going to give you any data. We're not going to let you take our contracts, because at the end of the day, we don't want to have our stuff living side by side with perhaps, some of the illegal stuff that's out there. and then ultimately have to explain that to, some SME customer who wants to know why their stuff was living on systems that were housing stuff that was illegal. So, we might say that, but who knows? You might have found a lucrative niche. There might be somebody who says, well, look, I'm going to build one of these, streaming sites that essentially houses illegal content. And you find out that you can, make 22 SCP per terabyte by housing it. And you're willing to absorb the risk because you think that, maybe the law doesn't really cover you as a storage provider. You might go that direction. I think that's definitely going to be a thing that happens on the network. Or let's just take it and say a little bit more realistic and say, maybe we end up out there talking to customers and we find out that we've got a couple of different customer types. We've got a customer type who is somebody who wants a very bespoke, very clean, very, consistent, and the messaging and auditing and the whole nine is there behind it. And they say, we want that network. We want your premier network. And we say, okay, well, you can have the premier network, but it's X amount of dollars per terabyte per month. And then we have another customer who says, well, look, I don't really care because this stuff is just second archive and I just need to get it up there and hold it long term. I do need some requirements to make sure that it can't be touched or wrecked or anything like that. Can't be ransomware, blah, blah, blah. And then ultimately they say, but we don't want to pay an arm and a leg for it. So it is what it is. And we say, okay, well, that's our tier B, or that's our, second tier of storage, or whatever we end up calling it. And it could be a situation where, that's the network that we just sort of let everything hang loose. And ultimately, yeah, you do get the software, but you end up, on a tier that doesn't earn as much as the tier that the examiners are on. Because on the examiners, we can take any data. We can take medical data. We can take, compliance regime data from all over the globe, depending on what, some jurisdiction decides that they need to stamp on it for a regime. So I don't know. All I'm doing right now is spitballing with you. And I'm just telling you, these are the things I think about on a day-to-day basis. And, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And, that's going to be us when we get out there and start selling storage. We're going to find out that a lot of things that we thought were true maybe aren't true. And ultimately we have to go in other directions. So we're not writing anybody off. We're not, saying that people are going to, but we are saying very clearly that we are going to take care of examiners. So yeah. I think that is the key knowledge that you have to always have in the back pocket, is that if you have an examiner order, or if you're planning on buying one this year, you are going to win. And that's just the end of that story. It doesn't yet say that if you have a DIY or some other configuration, you're going to lose. It just doesn't say that. It says examiners are going to win.
That's cool. That makes sense. Like, there's a lot of things about, because when I heard you say cut them off of DIY, I figured that was like done, like EXO, no getting it at all. But
well, Helium faced that decision and they made it. Helium faced it and they made that, and it's possible that we end up facing it and make it. I'm not. Nothing's off the table. Nothing's on the table.
Got it. With that being said, would it be treated somewhat similar to what Helium did when it came?
I said we would grandfather. That's for certain. If you're here now, you get to be here forever.
Got it. That's awesome, man. Okay, yeah, I love it. Really cool stuff. And appreciate you answering questions up here.
Sure.
Awesome.
Thanks. All right, last one. VE7. No? Come to the stage. Okay, well, I'll wrap this up then and give you a couple 6 or 7 seconds to try and get. There you go.
There we go. Okay, I got 2 questions to ask. First question: I created a green miner by using an ARM chip. Should I be in a hurry to switch it to an AMD chip, or do I have time?
Well, again, I mean, there's no hard and fast answer to that. There just isn't. When we said we're not supporting Pi, all it means right now is we took down the binaries off our website. You can still go to the source code and build the binary yourself and run a Pi and really at this point there's nothing. We don't have anything happening right now internally that says don't put data on a Pi unit. If you have a Pi unit on our network and we happen to be banging on your area with testing, you're going to get some data. Support means right now exactly what it sounds like. We aren't building the binaries and we aren't writing, guides for them, and we aren't actually having a channel where, somebody will really just help you to do whatever you want to do on there. In the future, yeah, we may start to pull support in terms of how much data we feed you. So you should be looking longer term to a different configuration, but look, who knows? That rig might run for a year and a half before there's any real deprecation to it.
Okay, because I went out and bought myself an AMD B-Link processor to replace it anyways. Now, the second question is that I'm a green miner. I use zero carbon emissions. So are you ESG compliant? You know what I'm talking about?
Well, I know what I think you're talking about, but
this is with the Paris Accord. So ESG, for those who don't know, is environmental social governance. Now the trend is everyone to go green. So I have solar panels and Tesla Powerwalls. By the way, people, I had to wait 14 months for my Tesla Powerwalls. So here people are whining, waiting 4 months. Yes, so what some people are doing, like Hubert, for example, if you want to ride in a green car, they have them available, but you get charged extra. So maybe another selling point you can do in the future, you can say we have green miners that produce zero carbon emissions.
Yeah,
and
so
has that as a marketing point.
Yeah, so here's the story on that. So I'm almost absolutely positive that when you let off that section, that some reasonable large percentage of the group here that's listening started rolling their eyes, and they shouldn't though, because in the end of the day, here's one of the reasons why we started this thing, and one of the things that we saw really early on. When Amazon sinks a data center, one of the things that ends up happening, so first of all, they go out and they're going to spend some $500-600 million to sink a data center. And all a data center is a big giant building, right? And it is what it is. But the other thing that they end up doing is to go and get a lot of tax breaks from the local community, because when you fire up a giant data center like that and just cram in all this electronic componentry and so forth, the amount of wasted energy is enormous. They actually have this, I've talked about it multiple times, this PUE factor, which is a power use equation that they come up with that speaks directly to how inefficient it is to run a data center. If the number was 1, right, then that means that it would just be running electrical components and you paid for the cost of what it was. That's not efficient, but it is at least, you're only paying to run the computers. But that's not the case. They're all 1.5 and 2 and 2.5 and higher. And what ends up happening is they use enormous amounts of water. They use enormous amounts of extra electricity to run the air conditioning and the cooling systems that keep everything cool. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they are environmental disasters compared to what we're doing. So right out of the gate, even if you aren't green, right? Even if you aren't running solar or, wind or some other kind of capability like that to do renewable on your mining rig, right out of the gate, these hard drives themselves don't use an awful lot of power. So like the Examiner we've watched typically runs about 37 to 40 watts or something like that at the wall. So at the end of the day, putting these things in somebody's domicile or in their garage or in their shop ultimately is a much more efficient, on the order of 2 to 1, than the typical centralized data center. So right out of the gate, without any efficiency, we're already doing far better than the big centralized incumbents. if you start stacking on top of that actual green, capacity, then what ends up happening is we just have a huge sales win. I mean, we have this big marketing win that we can just extrapolate across the board. We can charge more for it. We can, put ourselves in a positioning against the majors in a way that makes people really feel good about things. And this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart, because even though most of the people that I run into in crypto tend to be libertarian and even anarchist, but there's a lot of more right leaning folks than there are left. I tend to come from the left leaning side, so I do see that as being a real big issue. But I see it more from the fact that I'm a salesperson at heart, not necessarily a political person, and I can make money off it. So it's a thing that we definitely agree with, and so yeah, I think you're on the right track.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, been a great one tonight. Appreciate everybody again, turning it out for this. We didn't get it in under an hour, but I guess we're going to keep trying as we go forward. Just want to continue to say thanks to everybody for being here and sticking around. We are kind of starting now to get that consolidation period in absorbing the big community, and I really think that over the next 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to really start to see things smooth out, and I think the plane is now fueled up and on the runway, and I think we're really kind of just doing those last minute sort of checks as we kind of work through the commits and everything to get to product launch. So, have more patience, stay with us, help your fellow members out, participate in the community. And again, just a great thanks for being here. So we'll see you next week.